First of all, why am I presenting this today? It's probably because it was a big part of my life for many years, and it was a journey that I developed during as a mother, as a person, as a practitioner, and it's still in my life because as a result of this research. And during that research, I become one of the founders and a trustee of a charity called Cocoon that are helping parents, mothers and fathers with their transition to parenthood, who struggles in any possible ways. And the charity provides different services. We do guided peer support, therapy, groups, we have counseling one-to-one services, and based on this study I designed a 12-week group that's based on 4 dimensions of existence, and within it is a 12-week group, and within these 12 weeks mothers are supported to explore the transition and the new being in the world as mothers, through the 4 dimensions of existence. So I will talk to you about this a little bit more. Okay, so as I mentioned, this journey holds 2 parallel processes. One is a personal and second is professional exploration. And this journey begins with my realization when I had my child, that I was not feeling at home of my being in the world. And therefore, as an existential practitioner, I become passionate into exploring and getting better understanding of the transition to motherhood after the birth, to being in the world as a mother from existential perspectives. So the research question was, what are mothers' experiences of the transition to being in the world as a mother after the birth within the 4 dimensions of existence? And the aim was to explore the lived experiences of 8 first-time mothers' transition to motherhood within the framework of 4 dimensions of existence outlined by Amy Van Dusen. So, as human space is multidimensional, as Amy Van Dusen highlighted, and this diagram was borrowed by me from her book. And we are biosocial spiritual organisms joining this world in everything we are and do. On each dimension, we face with paradoxes and tensions of existential issues. For example, the physical dimension is between life and death, when we face with thorns, limitations and possibilities of embodiment. On the social dimension, between love and hate, when we dwell with isolation and belongings. And the personal dimension is between identity and freedom, when we facing our authentic and inauthentic mode of living, freedom of choice, responsibilities. And in the spiritual dimension is tensions between good and evil, when we addressing values and beliefs and purpose and meaning of our lives. Therefore, and I have to mention that the experiences of each dimension are interrelated and interconnected. And therefore, I believe that being in the world as a mother cannot be addressed or understood separately as internal or external changes, because they're intertwined and interconnected during that transition. Just to give a little background of what literature I addressed in this research. So I used these keywords to in search of qualitative, phenomenological, hermeneutic researches, and the keywords that help me to capture the data of existing literature of the experiences of transition to motherhood, corresponding to 4 dimensions of existence. So I searched for different embodiment experiences, breastfeeding, for example, parenthood, relationality, identity, responsibilities, and meaning making, and spirituality. And I guess, as you guess, As you may guess, many writers and researchers demonstrate the complexity of the transition to motherhood. However, very little written about the journey to being in the world as a mother from existential perspectives. And moreover, I found very little written about how those experiences are intertwined and interrelated with these four dimensions of existence. The structure of four dimensions has been used by several studies, for example, Adams and others, Green and Arnold Baker, who observe specific aspects of transition to motherhood using the structure of four dimensions. My research also was built upon the foundation of other phenomenological research papers, books, who address the transition to motherhood from existential perspectives, and I just named a few here. The findings were contextualized and interpreted from writings of existential writers, philosophers, theorists, and again, just mention a few. My research of the vast literature of the transition to motherhood from different perspectives very soon become overwhelming, because since every aspect of the transition was felt fundamentally important, and yet they all were intertwined and interrelated. Upon reflection, these experiences began to settle quite naturally when I viewed them through the prism of four dimensions of existence, which gave structure and meaning to otherwise unruly and complicated assemblage of experiences that previously seemed bleed into each other. So the findings of my literature review that I found, I have presented within the structure of four dimensions that helped me to set the foundation for this research investigation. Just to mention the methodology that I used, because I was researching the lived experiences of the phenomena of the transition to motherhood, I employed a phenomenological research method. And as this research was born from my own personal experiences as a mother that I could not be separated from, I used a Heideggerian interpretive hermeneutic phenomenology that allowed me to keep my stand as being in the world through this research as a mother and as a researcher. And using a reflective diary and reflexivity was a big part of this research that helped me to keep the awareness of my own experiences and further help my more phenomenological stand towards my participants' experiences during my interpretation of their life world. So I considered and rejected structural existential analysis because I decided to follow Heideggerian interpretative phenomenology, and I chosen Van Manen's methodological structure. As Van Manen saw description and interpretation as continuum, and his methodological structure was based on work of Heidegger, Merleau-Ponty, and Gadamer. And also Van Manen encouraged creativity in methodology that allowed me to use four dimensions of existence. So the map of four dimensions of existence was used not only to provide the structure of this research, but also as a guide for the questioning and interrogation of the data. So just to show you the demographics of my participants, they were aged between 30 and 45, who have chosen motherhood. It was a choice. Live with their partners, fathers at that time. Their children were between 6 months and 2 years old, and they were not clinically diagnosed with postnatal depression. So I conducted some structured interview that lasted between 60 and 90 minutes, and I constructed questions that helped me to gather the data or to a reflection of mother's experiences through 4 dimensions of existence. Ethical considerations were taken, was very important part, informed consent was sent prior to interviews, confidentiality was discussed before the interviews, and all the participants were debriefed. So this was the process analysis, as you can see, was all based on 4 dimensions of existence. So I transcribed each mother's interview by myself, and anonymized the data and sent those transcripts to mothers for them to look and approve. So they all approved and sent it back. I used my mother line-by-line detailed approach to isolate thematic statements. The sentences or sentence clusters were coded and interpreted and separated according to 4 dimensions of existence. And this process was repeated for each transcript. So what I end up to have, I have 8 different piles with separated in 4 dimensions. So then the data of all mothers was merged together according to 4 dimensions, and then common themes and sub-themes were identified. So I come up with the 5 main themes with the sub-themes, and I will be talking about them in more details. So the theme 1, life before motherhood. So the transition to motherhood began when a woman stepped out of life before motherhood into life as a mother. So to begin the exploration of this transition, I invited mothers to reflect on their memories, what their life were like before motherhood. And I was fascinated how every mother chose the same keywords to describe their life before motherhood. And they were independent, free, being in control, active. Life was all about me. So before I named the first sub-themes, it was all about me. For example, the participant 7 was saying, we traveled a lot, we went out a lot, and we drank a lot. It felt kind of indulgent now. When I look back at my life before I had her, I really did what I wanted for a very long time. And all 8 mothers more or less described their life before motherhood in those lines. So what I believe mothers reflecting on their life before motherhood as life when choices and responsibilities were mainly about themselves. I believe that what mothers are describing in being independent and free from the responsibilities for their children and consequences these responsibilities entail. So the participants in this research all believed that they made a decision to become a mother. But what was interesting that every participant said that they always knew that what to be mothers. They specifically said that. But what they chose is the partners, is the right time, they were ready for change. So what was interesting for me, and I talk about this more in decision to have a child, that was it a choice to choose to become a mother, or was it a choice, was the time of the choice was about time and about the partner. So I talk about this more in decision to have a child, because then I'm questioning that this choice was informed by the culture and the history of women being positioned in. For example, participant 4 saying, I always thought I knew that I wanted to be a mom, and I thought it would be quite easy. And I think it's happened right in the perfect time. I was ready to commit. So reflecting on their expectations of motherhood, all women described not being aware or prepared for dramatic changes that motherhood entails. They describe the expectations of life will carry on mainly the way it was before, but with the little person on board. So what I believe the result of what theme 1 is demonstrate is that at the very beginning of the transition to motherhood, it starts with the place of unawareness and unpreparedness for the consequences and responsibility that irreversible choice of becoming a mother entailed. The paradox that women felt that on the one hand they made a choice, but on the one hand they felt thrown into this unknown situation when they felt not experiencing freedom or autonomy or choice. And they were not aware or prepared for the changes that motherhood brought into their lives through all 4 dimensions of existence. So in theme 2, I will talk a little bit about the changes on the physical dimension. And it has 4 sub-themes: birth and death, facing mortality, time and space with the baby under my skin, always tired and my body as a mother. So women reflected on how through the experience of childbirth, when facing a new life, mothers were facing a death too. The awareness of their children's mortality and their own. Mothers in this research demonstrate a high level of anxiety faced with fragility of their children, the possibility of loss and responsibilities of their children's survival, birth and death. For example, participant 2 said, "I do worry that I have burdened another human being with mortality. I feel that I brought a child to this world for my pleasure, and he has to accept that he was born and will have to die. If you create a life, you always have to be there for them. That initial choice was not theirs, so we need to support them in life." So I guess that it was parenting, and I guess that is what parenting is all about. And also mothers were mothers of children's mortality, but their own, as some participants were saying, "Before I was careless, I took life as an adventure. Now I have to think that I have a baby, look after her, be there for her all her life. Also I have to look after myself for her. What if anything happened to me? Who will be there for her? It is all new responsibilities." The feeling of responsibility for their children's survival and well-being changed mothers' lifestyle and their relationship with time and space. All 8 mothers describe prioritizing their time meeting their children's needs, which come before their own needs, before their own well-being. Mother's time become defined by the children's needs and experience it as here and now. For example, one of the mothers was saying, "In the first few months, it is so intense. Every day feels like a lifetime. I didn't have time to do anything else. I didn't know what's going on in the world except for your little world with your baby. And I think that you are all wound up in your tiredness. I find it quite hard." So, sorry, we're still on the physical dimension. So women reflected they were expecting to be busy and looking after their children, but they were not prepared for the level of change of the lifestyle and the lack of me time in their life. Therefore, the level of tiredness, physical and psychological, came as a shocking surprise. And most mothers reflected that the level of tiredness is one of the main challenges of the motherhood. I was surprised that women put very little attention or emphasis on their relationship with their body, even though I deliberately asked them that question. But all 8 mothers mentioned how lucky they are, most of mothers, how lucky they are to go back in the previous shape before they were mothers. And they all mentioned that they are dressed differently now when they are mothers. In the way what they were describing, that they're putting less emphasis, they're not dressing for themselves as a feminine sexual being, they're dressing for the child because they are they are in the role of the mother, so they're not for themselves, they're there for the child. So what I believe this theme too is indicating that the first wave of responsibility the mother experiencing is on a physical dimension. The biological responsibility for the child's survival and well-being, because their body, their time, their life will all transparent from this sense of responsibility for their children. So on the social dimension, mother described a strong awareness of being judged by others. They're being judged for their own actions and their children's actions too, as they both had to conform to societal norms and expectations. And I'm calling that performing motherhood. These mothers express how the social constructed meaning of the concept of a good mother and a bad mother molded their own evaluation of their performance as mothers. For example, one mother saying, "I would be thinking that people are looking at me and judging. I felt powerless and helpless, that they thought I was not a very good mom, and I was questioning myself if I was good enough. Every time she cried, I felt like a failure. I felt that I was not good enough, and that's why she was crying. Other moms seem to know what to do." As the focus of mothers' attention was centered on the child's needs, mothers in this research describe that their partner become no longer their priorities. So every mother in this research described that the relationship with their partners changed from being a couple to being a parent. And I addressing this in relationship with their partners. Like, for example, one of the moms was saying, "Now we are more into her, she comes first, and he is not my priority. We don't have the time for us as a couple. We are more parents than a couple." Also, every woman, even though every mother in this research had their own story to tell and their own relationship with their mothers, every woman spoke about re-evaluating and revisiting and re-evaluating the relationship with their mothers. Now that they become mothers themselves, and how this influenced their own mothering. For example, some mothers were saying, "First of all, the relationship with my mother changed. Now I understand her better." Not every mother understood there was positive and there was different stories. Some mothers would become closer with their mothers and understood them better and appreciated them better. Other mothers described that they were questioning their relationship and how their childhood and their relationship with their mothers. But what all I suppose was common to them, that they have revisited and reevaluated what happened, their relationship with their mothers. And they all began to see their mothers, not just as mothers, but also as women too, that were positioned in their own history and their own culture. Women also describe how they all become closer to their families, more involved and familiar, and more stronger sense of belonging. Mothers also reflected on how position of being with others was reconstructed, not only with their immediate and extensive family, but also with their friends and colleagues. Every mother in this research described loss of some previous relationships and the gain of a new relationship with whom they can now share their new being, the new life world. So some others saying, the relationship with my friends definitely changed. So with my single friends, they distance themselves from me because they don't get it. I don't have the same flexibility. And the other mother would say, "I think our relationship changed with people who are already parents. We have so much in common." So on a personal dimension, women describe a transition from a position of being a number one for oneself, prioritizing oneself needs, into position when they're choosing and accepting their ability and their willingness to put their children before themselves. Although this was a willing sacrifice, mothers describe feeling of loss, the loss of relationship that they had before with themselves. For example, one of the mothers said, "Now everything changed, the fact that your lifestyle, like your life doesn't belong to you anymore. My child is my priority now. She comes first." As a consequence of taking responsibility for their children's well-being, women in this study describe a feeling of high anxiety, of wrongdoing, inadequacy and guilt. They describe how caring for their infant involves moral ambiguity over how to best understood and fulfill their children's needs. And with responsibility came vulnerability of their choices. So every participant in this research described a journey from feeling lost, inadequate, incompetent as a mother, to finding their own style of a mothering. It took time for them to learn how to respond to children's and understand their children's needs, and how to balance those needs with their own needs, and also how to balance their own values and beliefs with the societal expectations of how to mother. So all 8 mothers described that their identity as the mother as the most important one. Nevertheless, 7 out of 8 mothers highlighted the importance of them to go back to work, to go back to society. They want and need to go back to their identities that they have not lost, but they just dismissed, or just not dismissed, but put on hold. So they wanted to be able to balance their identity as a mother with other identities they hold previously in the society. However, every woman described how challenging this balance can be, full of anxiety and guilt as they try to be facing the paradox of combining the identity of a modern woman and traditional mother. Also, the mothers in this research extensively reflected on how motherhood changed the way they related to themselves. It stimulated the transition to motherhood, stimulated the better awareness of their values and transformation to personal qualities, such as becoming more patient, more empathetic towards themselves and towards others, less self-centered, or some mothers call become less selfish. They become more mature and kind of sense of confidence and groundedness. So, on the spiritual world, women in this study describe feeling surprised and often overwhelmed by the intensity of their emotional responses to their children. The women describe how mother-child relationship as unlike any other, a feeling of unconditional love that goes beyond the words and cannot be understood unless you experience it yourself. Therefore, I believe that the description of these feelings are central to this mother's account of motherhood. Every mother in this research described the re-evaluation and reorganization of their values and priorities, and how becoming a mother changed the meaning and purpose in life. Mothers described the new meaning of their deep commitment and responsibility for their children's well-being through all 4 dimensions of existence. So I believe all the themes tell a common story of how, in accepting motherhood, a woman is accepting the responsibility for the other, her child. that could be described as an existential responsibility that creates changes through all 4 dimensions of existence. And the findings of this study demonstrate how the experiences of 8 new mothers are intertwined and interrelated within all 4 dimensions of existence. These findings are in line with many writers and researchers who demonstrate the complexity of the transition to motherhood. And also they're in line with the researchers who argue that transition to motherhood can be seen as an existential crisis. And I believe that viewing the transition to motherhood as an existential crisis reveals a journey that begins with deformalization from feeling at home at being in the world, as Heidegger described, when women feel displaced from their sense of known how in the known world, when they could follow the day, the crowd or the herd, and being soothed away to extend from the experiences of anxiety and responsibility for their choices, and living in an authentic mode of living. And becoming a mother places a woman in an urgent experience, as Heidegger term, or limited situation, as Jasper described, that cannot be changed, but only visualized more clearly. And through that visualization, that prompts mother into more mindfulness way of being through all 4 dimensions of her being in the world. For example, on the physical dimension, mothers in this research demonstrate facing the awareness of fundamental existential givens of life and death, the awareness of anxiety, or awareness of anxiety of mortality. Mothers become more aware of limitations and possibilities of embodiment, their own and their children. Their perception of time and space become more phenomenological, as here and now. When women had to learn to share their being in the world with their children and see life through 2 sets of eyes, their own and their children. On the social dimension, mothers reflected on how their new relationship with child altered their position of being with others in society, with the partner, with the family, with friends. They described a heightened awareness of existential issues of relationality, isolation and belonging, becoming more mindful of their position in the world as the they being with, as always, as described by Heidegger, always in relation and always in the world. On a personal dimension, women in this research demonstrate facing existential issues of responsibility, choice, freedom and autonomy. They become more aware of the attention in experiencing world of minors that always mind but always position in the world with others. Women were confronted with awareness of personal choice on how to mother and how to, at the same time, how to confront the social script of a good mother. They become aware of responsibilities for their choices that entail feeling of anxiety and guilt. The call of consciousness triggered mothers' awareness of their freedom, possibilities and authorship. This encouraged them to become more mindful of their values, beliefs, priorities in life, and possibilities of living more mindful, authentic mode of living. These findings point out the existential perception of self that is not fixed and static entirety, but rather as overchanging through the creative process marked by freedom and responsibility. Mothers in this research did not describe the sacrifice or loss of the self. Instead, they reconstructed the sense of self through their relationship with their children. On a spiritual dimension, all mothers in this research describe how the mother-child relationship provided them with a unique opportunity to experience unconditional love within their being, a quality of ultimate trustworthiness and acceptance. They describe intense feeling of intimacy, a newfound sense of interconnections, interdependence, and general relatedness. All this can be shown as an example of a spiritual tenet. Therefore, I believe that the spiritual dimension takes the mother-child relationship beyond the relational world, and it's pointing to a spiritual connection that nurtures not just the growth of the child, but actually as well the growth of transformational growth of the mother. It could be argued that this journey of existential crisis was essential for mothers to find meaning and purpose in life, to be able to reevaluate and reconstruct their value system, their beliefs, to comfort their anxiety and make sense of their experiences of choices and responsibilities, and to become at home in being in the world as mothers again. While it's true that the map is not a territory as Emmy Van Dozen highlighted, I believe that the outcome of this study demonstrates that addressing the transition to motherhood as an existential crisis instead of a pathological one, using the map of 4 dimensions of existence, can provide practitioners with comprehensive framework in supporting mothers to address their changes on each dimension, to explore how they intertwine and interrelated, and to see the bigger picture of their now new being in the world as mothers. And also how mothers' new experiences of responsibility for their children, for the other, instigate changes across all 4 dimensions. And helping mothers to reflect on those changes through more mindful and authentic choices that led to personal growth, and navigate mothers away from self-criticism and self-blame towards normalizing and welcoming their powerful maternal experiences instead of rushing to change and fix them. And it might also help mothers to reflect on their journey of transition to motherhood as a spiritual one. As a contribution to the field, as I already mentioned, that using the 4 dimensions and looking at transition to motherhood as an existential crisis can help mothers to empower them and give them the sense of choices and understanding how vast and big it is, and help them to go into details and look at each dimension what's happening, because they can be lost in the vast changes of what motherhood is generating. Finishing this research, I regretted I didn't use structural existential analysis because now I understood. I had different experiences, I had better understanding, and I think it will be interesting to do the further research and maybe have a look how using this frame can be to see the outcomes of the group we're running using this frame, and see how useful that is for mothers, because we had really empowering outcomes, reflections from mothers. Also, the homogenic pool of my sampling was is a big limitation for this research, of course, and it will be interesting to see how that can be used with all different group of participants, like teenage mothers or single mothers, and many others. And as well as I mentioned, it will be very useful to use structural existential analysis and actually use the compass of emotions, and to explore more the paradoxes that mothers are influencing, not just looking at 4 dimensions. Thank you for listening. Thank you very much.
I think we're all very keen to get away. mainly wanted to enjoy your presentation first, so perhaps we just take one or two absolutely essential questions, and then we can call it a slightly earlier evening. Would that suit everybody?
Yes. What is really impressive is how similar people's responses were, and how, as a mother, you recognize all of this stuff, don't you? It's incredible how that experience puts us through such a similar maze, all of us. Of course, mostly as a first-time mother, isn't it? It's a little bit different with second or third children. It's that being plunged into becoming a different person. It's like giving birth to yourself in a completely new way, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Did nobody say that? I mean, it's what I felt very strongly when it happened to me. That literally was like I became a different person, like I had transformed myself. When it felt like, giving birth is like being turned inside out, isn't it? And that literally felt like that carried on and it carried on. And my whole life was being turned upside down and inside out. And I had to completely reinvent what life was about.
Absolutely, and that's when the change is generated, because all mothers, and you're absolutely right, I found it fascinating, the similarities in their responses, because what mothers were saying as even though they knew they will be mothers, they were pregnant, and they've done their research, they know what motherhood is about, they had their expectations, but they didn't. They all felt they were just thrown into this completely unknown world, and they have to become very mindful of what their choices, what are their values. What are they going to lose? What are they going to protect? They become protectors of their values, because the values had to be reconstructed and reevaluated, purposely changed.
Totally.
But what they all highlighted, and I felt that it was one main theme through everything, is the responsibility for the other, that strong responsibility that generated everything, responsibility for their children. And what became apparent that becoming a mother, it's in a way given us when we're giving a birth to a child. But motherhood is a choice. Because the mother who rejects a child, she's still a mother. The child who loses a mother, she's still a mother. And it's a different mother identity. But when a woman chooses to accept that responsiveness and responsibility for her child, in all her being in the world, this is what constructs her new being in the world as a mother.
Yeah, and as a person.
As a person,
yes,
of course.
It's a new lens to live through, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah. You agree?
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely.
I missed the bit where you talked about examples. I'm really sorry.
Yes, it was fascinating. They said some amazing things, like the thing about time, I think, was very striking. That you experience time as no longer belonging to you. It's like somebody has come and robbed your time away, and they're sucking the time away from you. They determine what you do at what time, any time of the day or the night. You're at their mercy. You didn't say that thing about being at the mercy, but I felt that very strongly. It's like somebody else. So the locus of control has shifted from me to them. They determine what I must do and when I must do it and how I must do it, because if I get it slightly wrong, they'll punish me for it greatly. And
that's important, you will punish yourself.
Yeah, you punish yourself.
You feel,
but they punish you
is that
if you don't concentrate properly and you give them exactly what they need, they'll cry at you. And then it becomes twice as hard or 3 times as hard. You know exactly what I'm talking about.
And that's when women felt in a way, taken away from the world that they knew. The time was constructed socially, the time when the breakfast, lunch and dinner, the weekends and working time,
So you can shift it around if you like.
Absolutely. So you
People
make
say, I'm not doing
choices.
this, I'm not having lunch, or I'm not... But that's not possible anymore. I mean,
With
your
a
own
child,
lunch
there's
doesn't
not.
matter.
And my
Yes.
time now begins after Bella goes to sleep. Then that's my time.
Exactly.
That's my time.
Yeah, you got some time back.
Yeah, I've got
Yes.
some time back.
Because she's growing up.
Yeah, up until that point, until she's asleep, when I'm with her all day, my time is...
It's hers.
And
Yeah.
what you're describing, what every mother described in my research, that the time becomes defined by my children's needs.
Yes, that's it.
So
Completely.
how much would you have had to leave out of that talk if you substituted the word fathers for mothers?
That's a very interesting one, because the father's going through transformation, of course,
A different one though.
in a different one. Some can say it's slower, some can say it's different, because what mothers, in the theme, in the relationship with the partner, what they were saying, it's not even about how much the housework they have to do, but it is more about that they felt the fathers have not feeling that sense of responsibility the way mothers do. So they are transforming, but not to the same extent. And the fathers having their different way, because what they do, they're going back to the world, it's less changed for them. The sense of responsibility is there. They may work longer hours, they come back more tired, but they're going to the same world they used to do before. So they will be defined by lunch, breakfast, lunch and dinner. They still have managers and structures that they are supported. There's the managers and colleagues there that they can talk about their tasks and everything
And
else.
their bodies haven't changed.
Their bodies has not
The
went through
big
what they
deal
went.
is that you
Absolutely.
bloat up for 9 months and you become a different person. There are 2 people inside of your body, which is very weird to begin with. And then you go through this incredible crisis of giving birth, which is like dying. And then, if you breastfeed for another 9 months or a year, your body is essential to this other separate person. And that feels like a physical bond and a physical reality that, of course, fathers will never experience. It is completely different. It's literally like a bit of yourself has become put out there. And you now need to look after that bit of yourself without being able to control it in any way. It's quite a stunt, isn't it?
Absolutely.
It's quite a difficult thing to get your head around.
Absolutely.
What about the father sense that they now have the responsibility of providing for
Yes, well that's what happens for the fathers, I think. Yes.
Absolutely.
Totally.
Absolutely. So that's what mothers are saying. They may have longer hours to work and everything else.
Yeah, but there's
However,
a moral responsibility too. It changes the father in terms of, feeling they owe them a living, as it were, and protection, also a whole raft of other things, yes. But it's not that physical experience of, this transformative thing. It can't be, because it doesn't happen in your body.
but even in time, if we start talking about this time and space, for the father changing way different and less than for the mother, because fathers still get up at 8 o'clock in the morning how he used to do, or of course he gets up early and feed the child, but he goes back into that world when he used to be, and the time is constructed at the social world the way it was before. Then he comes back home, and actually they experience it probably home in a different way, because for the mothers now, home is completely different world, and she used to go to work and come back, and home was just a relaxed time and feeling back time. For the mother, this is now working time 24/7, and then father comes back from work, and to him, home is a different concept. So they, in a way, slightly in a different world. And that's what mothers, it's not my, it's what
Yes.
coming from
Sure,
my
yes,
studies.
well, it wasn't quite like that for me because I was the main breadwinner, so I did
Right.
both of those things.
Right.
I take my child with me to work and breastfeed him while I was teaching about the psychology of women at the
Right.
time. And then I'd made my way back on the underground with a tiny little baby, and then I'd come home to find somebody who wasn't actually working and who kind of, you know, then might be able to take the child off my hands, but immediately couldn't do it because, you know, I had to feed the child, or it's complicated. But even then, you know, I had my work and I had my dignity as a person, same as before, but I couldn't manage that role in the way I had before. I felt hampered in executing my tasks because my concentration wasn't on it, and I was constantly divided between my child's needs and the work's needs, and I'm sure you know a bit about that too.
Yeah.
And that carried on for, God, 20 years more, 25 years, you know, having 2 children 5 years apart. And for all that time, there was this tearing guilt of never doing enough for the children and never doing enough for my work.
That's what Mother is describing, the guilt when they try to go back to society, that balance between a modern woman and a traditional mother.
I've never
That
seen
balance
that in a father.
It is constant guilt, constant guilt.
But yeah, but guilt is a very easy word to say. It isn't just guilt. It's like a tearing apart at the center of you.
As Heidegger described, the guilt is the other side of responsibility.
Yeah, but it's always there. It's omnipresent.
Because the responsibility, feeling of responsibility is there. And that's what when I was doing analysis, that word responsibility was screaming at me, and everything what was described, it's because they felt that responsibility for their children. All the choices, all the transitions, all, as you say, guilt, vulnerability was outcome of that responsibility, chosen
Not just the responsibility though, because there's this redeeming quality that you brought out so wonderfully at the spiritual dimension.
Yes.
This incredible sense that something has happened to you, that you love another tiny little human being in a way you didn't know you were capable of loving.
Absolutely.
It isn't even like love anymore. It is a kind of an all-encompassing care that is just there, and that just becomes more and more and more and more. And no matter how much guilt you feel, or how hard it is, or how tired you are, the more tired you are, the more love you feel in a way. And it is sort of endless, isn't it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And again, talking about this amazing feeling mothers could not describe in words, they were saying but I have to mention the other side of that coin. The more I love this child, the more responsible I feel, the more dedication I feel.
Yes, they go together, yes, absolutely.
And they wear this paradox between saying that what they lost and something, and they're saying, I will never change this for the world, I have never done anything better, I have never achieved anything more than what I achieved having being a mother.
It's the most important thing.
It is the most important
because
thing.
it was the most transformative thing I ever did.
Absolutely, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
You forget that after a while.
I don't
When
think
the kids
it's
get
yet.
bigger, you mean? When the kids get bigger, you mean?
Yeah.
I don't know how big they need to be, because I think it's just, I think this relationship and it's always evolving, because the older your children are, you're constantly re-evaluating that relationship and responsibility and everything what's happening in that relationship. I have a 30-year-old and I worried about him and feel responsible not less than my 9-year-old in different ways.
I know.
Sometimes I even feel
don't
have
even
less
get me
control.
going on that.
Yes, I felt less control.
We are having to constantly suppress that, because you know that after a certain age, sort of 17, 18, it's out of order for you to care that much, or to want to control their lives, or to want to give them advice, or to want to intervene or interfere.
Absolutely.
So then it becomes a struggle to build it out, isn't it? To sort of take it down and to kind of put some water over the love, because you know that you might destroy them with it, and you have to take it back.
As you just said, it's different challenges.
Yes.
It's never less challenges.
Other side of
It's
the
they
coin.
just different challenges. So it's constant,
Yes.
constant moving relationship.
Something to look
Yes, I
forward
know, I was
to.
just thinking that.
Yes.
Yes.
There's a good phase in the middle. I think the best, easiest time, well, I'm just speaking for myself, is between when they're 4 and about 10. I think between 4 and 10.
Oh, I didn't like them so much.
They're
then.
kind of sensible enough, and they're still close to you. They're still cuddly and part of your physical world.
I like them up till 4. Better.
Do you? You like really little ones better? That's interesting.
Mm.
No, I think when they're very tiny, it's so much responsibility, it's so exhausting. I think that first year is a killer myself.
Well,
Yes,
it's
because
moving too.
you two separate people, but you one.
Yeah.
It is. But I think that what this study provided me as a practitioner, it's this understanding that it's like as you mentioned, not now but a bit earlier, it's a trauma.
Yeah,
It's an existential crisis
Totally.
when you need to reconstruct everything through all 4 dimensions. Your
Everything's
physical,
destroyed.
your social, your personal, your
Totally.
spiritual. So you have to become, as a post-traumatic growth, if you manage to went through it and process, you become more mindful because you're looking around where I am at and where is my new direction. And motherhood gives you exactly the same shake you out of the life you knew into when you have to completely reconstruct and decide who am I now and where am I going.
But that definitely takes a few years.
Yes.
I think the first few years, especially with the first child, are
Yes.
definitely traumatic. And I
Yes.
think a lot of women don't want to acknowledge that, and they
But
pretend.
if they have
it's all
support,
okay.
if they could hear,
Yes.
and if they have support with the structure
Yes.
when we are addressing what's happening in the physical world, in the
Yes,
relational
that's
world,
true.
instead of just being absolutely overwhelmed and drowned
Yes.
in it and start to
Or
blame
being on your
yourself.
own with it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So having parents involved in it, I think, is
Oh, I
a
could have done it without.
very great asset. Yes.
And I think it's the answer to the question when people say, why are we still researching
Do it.
motherhood? Because in every motherhood is a cultural and historical concept, and in modern days, motherhood is even more difficult because you're challenging this freedom of choice and the society has its expectations from you to be a modern woman with all social responsibilities,
Yeah.
and at the same time you have to perform this traditional mother who gives everything and do everything. So how
And
they're
they're mutually
contradictions.
contradictory.
They're contradictory.
Yes.
So how do you combine this?
Not,
and
not to
that's
mention
choice.
remaining a sexual woman who
Absolutely.
is still attractive at the same time, when we know that in that first year or so, that's the last thing you're interested in. And it's a huge task to reassemble that body in a way that makes it like that again, isn't it? That we don't sort of, talk about that very much, but it's actually really hard to do. When all you really want to do is not care really about what you look like, or you just want to do that job of looking after that child.
Absolutely. But therefore, the transition to motherhood more traumatic nowadays than it was 100, 200 years ago.
Yeah.
Because there was less choice, those expectations to be a traditional mother.
That's
Now
correct.
you're bombarded with choices, therefore responsibilities and guilt and values and every minute of it.
Yeah.
Therefore it's more traumatic, more anxiety provoked by it.
Yes, let's not forget though that a
Yes.
century ago the chances of actually losing your baby were much greater.
Yes.
And that would have been monstrously
Absolutely.
awful, wouldn't it?
Therefore we need existential therapy to help women to understand that it's a new existence.
Yeah.
And I believe the 4 dimensions, it's fantastic structure that can help with this overwhelming
Wow.
transition.
Really nice piece of work. Thank you
you.
very much
Thank
indeed. I'm sure you will be publishing it in Claire's new book, will you?
I read one chapter and
Yeah,
yes,
correct.
she
Very good.
wants us to do another one about the groups that we're running based on 4 dimensions.
Yes, yeah, that would be good.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank